Coming up today on Zestology, pushing harder than normal, ice baths and sea swimming, oura rings, heart rate and heart rate variability, holidays, histamine, biohacking, healing crises, stress, and loads more.
Hi, I'm Tony. I'm an author, presenter at Sky Sports, and years ago I went to the jungle and got ill. Very ill. So this is my podcast adventure to find more energy. It's packed with biohacking, science, health tech, supplements, and some of the most well-known experts on the planet.
This is something I spent 4 months of my life doing with electrodes glued to my head so that you can do a lifetime worth of meditation.
Decide what you don't give a fuck about, which is something you don't care about.
Some of it gets quite out there.
I had some stem cells sent up to my house that I had stored, and then I injected myself with mannitol.
And we even hack hangovers.
Alcohol is poisonous. So is water and oxygen in the wrong dosage.
So that's my podcast, Zestology. Live life with energy, vitality, and motivation.
Yeah, welcome back to Zestology. It might sound in the background a little bit more tropical than usual, and that is because I'm trying not to gloat too much. And I realise how lucky I am in these strange and uncertain times that we've been living through for the last couple of years. I'm not in London today, but recording my podcast from a far more tropical location. I'm in Thailand and have been here for a week or two, and it's just been amazing. So, actually, we talk about sea swimming and ice baths and cold exposure in the podcast today with April Alexandra, and I have to say that there's no cold exposure at all involved in getting in the sea here in Thailand, but it does just feel so good for you. The grounding, the sea exposure, the sheer relaxation, all the minerals that I'm sure are going into you as well, which are probably offset by the fact I've been spraying myself with some very unnatural mosquito repellent at night. Look, I think I have very much a type A personality, and I know a lot of people who listen to this podcast have a similar sort of personality, and I'm really good at working hard and getting a little bit hypervigilant and overstressed and stimulated about my business, and I'm also pretty good at relaxing if I give myself the right situation. So I feel very privileged and lucky to be here and excited to bring you this podcast as well. And today's podcast is with April Alexandra, a nutrition expert with some serious credentials. She is a naturopathic clinical nutritionist. She's a clinical educator for various companies, and she lectures as well at the College of Naturopathic Medicine. And in fact, we got on so well in this conversation that afterwards we chatted, we sort of switched off the recording and carried on chatting for ages. And then we had another chat a couple of weeks later, and we're even thinking about collaborating on something small but exciting. So details of that coming in future. But before that, it is currently 8:50 in the morning. I am absolutely sweltering. I'm standing under the shade of a tree with the birds tweeting in the background. I'm going to go and have a little bit of breakfast now and possibly some guava juice. And I'm hoping next week there's going to be a podcast recorded from here with friend of the show, Brett Moran, who Brett and I have been in touch over the years and become good friends, and he lives here in Thailand. He's going to come and meet us for the last couple of days of our holiday. We're going to record a podcast here. So hopefully next week the whole podcast is going to come from here. We're going to talk about all sorts of things related to living in Thailand, but also an incredible new concept where you get paid for meditating, which I love. But in the meantime, here is the awesome April Alexandra on Zestology.
April, this has been a long time coming, but it's lovely to talk to you. How are you?
Yeah, thanks, Tony. I'm really good, thank you. Really, really well.
Excellent. I've just been reading on your biography that you worked on Game of Thrones. That's a proper claim to fame. What happened? What did you do?
Where did it all go wrong from there?
Yeah.
Well, originally, before I was working in nutrition, I actually worked in the performing arts world. So I have a degree in performing arts that I got when I was in England. And I loved that. I was super passionate about that. And that's essentially why I started there. And then when I obviously came home to Northern Ireland for a little while from the mainland, Game of Thrones was all go here, and basically if you live in Northern Ireland you must have been on Game of Thrones at some stage. So yeah, everyone's been involved in it here, so as extras and all sorts, and it was mega fun and really hard work as well.
I bet.
Yeah,
I mean, just the scale of it.
Yeah.
Wow, that's very cool. Okay, so do I need to look quite closely to see you, or are you sort of one of the main characters, or?
Oh gosh, no, I'm not a main character, but in a lot of scenes, I have to confess I have not watched Game of Thrones, and everyone goes, oh! Even my partner's like, I can't believe you've been on it and you haven't watched it.
Yeah.
But maybe one day I'll get to it. But I guess working on it, extremely long hours, leaving the set at midnight and coming back at 3 a.m.
Wow.
To start. I'm filming in the freezing cold, so I just haven't got around to it. Yeah. But it was really good.
Yeah, my wife was horrified when I watched the first 3 series and then skipped straight to the final one. But it sort of suited me very well. But I did enjoy it, I must say. Well, that's really cool anyway. And look, it's lovely to talk to you. Today, lots of things on the functional health menu, really. Obviously, we're going to talk a bit about histamine. You work for the company that makes Toxin-Prevent, and I've spoken to Dilly from Toxin-Prevent before. Tell me a little bit about what you do apart from Game of Thrones and your areas of expertise.
Sure. So I'm a clinical educator and practitioner with Nova Healthcare, and we obviously do a lot in line with histamine and histamine overload or intolerance, as well known as well. But aside from that, I have my own company, which is Alexandra Nutrition. So I'm a practitioner in that sense. So I'm working one-to-one with people, and I work from a naturopathic point of view. So very much looking at the whole person, as opposed to just the diet, for example. We're looking at all those good things, lifestyle, circadian rhythm, taking everything into an account. And I also lecture with CNM, so the College of Naturopathic Medicine. I lecture on the biomedicine and nutrition side of the course there. And I have a really big interest in thermography. I'm also a medical thermographer, so I do a lot of thermal imaging of the body to work out heat patterns in the body to detect potential inflammation or where inflammation is arising, which can point us down the route to maybe do some more testing if we think something is a little amiss with the individual. So I'm just all about optimizing people's health and my own health as well, always have been. And I guess I got into this role because I had some health issues myself in the past. And I've just found this line of work and working in a holistic way has just been life-changing, essentially. And it's inspirational. I think we can't all live every experience to help others, but if you have been through something and you find something that's really worked for you, I think it really helps in the course of helping others.
Yeah. So, I mean, so many people I speak to, certainly myself as well, been through that sort of healing crisis. Yeah. And that makes you want to do it.
Totally. You want to help others and you want to spread that word and say there's something out there that could really maybe better your quality of life or help you or a family member. So yeah, that's what it's all about, I suppose, in our world and our community.
Yeah, certainly. I also sort of think it's very hard at the time, but when you're going through a tough time health-wise, it could be a good thing in the long run. Not always, depending on the condition, but certainly for me, for example, had I sailed through life in my 20s and 30s, I wouldn't have taken pause to think about all those unhealthy things that I was doing. And I've been forced, because I'm not quite such a good detoxer and all sorts of things, I've been forced to think about that in much more detail. And therefore, I live a much healthier life now in my 40s. It's probably the same for you.
No. Yes, I totally agree with you, because when I work one-to-one with clients, they often say, for example, if we do genetic testing and we ascertain, like you said, they're not able to detox as well as they should be. I'm one of those people too. I'm deleted in a whole gene that helps me detox. So it explains to me and my clients why I've maybe lived a life where I felt like I'm very sensitive to things or overreactive to certain things. So it explains a lot for people. But then I always say to my clients, it's a blessing knowing, because it allows us to then prevent some of the big bad guys coming down the line. If we continuously have these little reactions, these little nudges, and our body's trying to tell us something, if we can not ignore those signs on the dashboard, then we're in a much better place to really look after our health. So I do feel blessed, sometimes, cursed, but I feel like the more we know, the better equipped we are to make the right or better choices.
Yeah, mostly blessed, sometimes slightly cursed. That's all good. Listen, it's so nice to meet people who are real experts in their area, who also appreciate histamine, because the knowledge around histamine, and this podcast is around energy and health and wellness, is more general, but I've spoken about histamine quite a bit, and so many people have resonated with that, and it's made a huge difference to my life. But it is still hard to find people who just sort of get it.
Yeah, I would agree. And even in the world that I work in, I mean, obviously most practitioners know lots about histamine, but some work more with it than others. So, and it's just so interesting when I meet clients who naturally don't know anything about histamine, really, apart from what they've heard about antihistamines, for example. And it's like opening Pandora's box for them and really starting to help people understand, oh my goodness, this is perhaps why I've been feeling this way for so long, and work together to create a plan that's going to support their health and reduce their symptoms long term, because I think it's something that's not spoken about enough. It's definitely ramping up there now, and more people are discussing it, but for a long time it was a real undercurrent, not being spoken about.
I mean, when I think back to how long I've had histamine symptoms, it's definitely longer than the life of the existence of the term histamine intolerance. I'm pretty sure the term didn't exist back in the late 90s, for example. So
yeah.
So I'm pleased that I'm living in a time where people do appreciate it a little bit more. And obviously you work for the company that makes Toxin Prevent. That's worked really well for me. And I think it's very interesting. One of the things I've been ruminating on recently, and I'm interested to know your thoughts on this, is the link between histamine, stress, and not even stress, but adrenaline. For example, now I've recently had a big sort of career change, not a big career change, but I'm focusing less on TV and more on my company, and I love it. It's just great. And because it's so great, I'm probably working a bit harder than I was before. And it matters a little bit more. All the money coming in is now sort of, I can't just turn up and dial it in on a day that I'm not feeling it. And you know that from running your own business as well. But I can tell my sort of stimulation levels are a bit higher. And I don't think that always suits me histamine wise. Is that something that resonates with you?
Yeah, totally. I mean, this is why when I touched on at the beginning about taking that naturopathic approach, that's one way, to look at it. Because we are, nothing is happening on its own in our body, as all systems are connected. So I totally relate to that. And people's stress levels, or even like you say, just adrenaline levels, their cortisol levels, etc., being a bit higher, being a bit more stimulated, that definitely influences people's histamine. And it's interwoven there because our nervous system, our enteric nervous system, is woven into our gut as well. And obviously the gut plays a huge role with regards to histamine and our DAO secretion as well. So a lot of people do find that when they are a little bit more stressed, or they're pushing a little bit harder than normal, for example, they could find that they're having more histamine type reactions. And they might find they're doing nothing else very different at that time. Yeah. But it all makes sense because it's linked together. So I'm very passionate about people trying to, when they can, put the tools in to support their nervous system as well. Because yes, we can put on all the good stuff. We can reduce the histamine foods in the diet. We can take the likes of Toxin Prevent to bind out the excess histamine. But essentially our nervous system is very, very responsible for much of our health, in my opinion. So putting the right tools in there to actually help support that and balance that. It's easier said than done. But, at a majority of time. And sometimes we have to step back. I really think, even myself, I have to step back some weeks and say, okay, are we tipping the scales too much in one way here? Because if you have quite a sensitive body, it will tell you that, it will communicate that with you.
Yeah, I mean, because I wear one of these Oura rings, and it gives me lots of information on heart rate and heart rate variability. And I don't necessarily actually see that much of a link between heart rate variability and histamine. But what I do see is that, for instance, when we went on holiday in October, my heart rate variability was just great. And as you know, over the last couple of months, I've had to cancel our interview because of COVID. You had COVID as well. Yeah. And you look back to full health now, which is great. And so am I. And then all sorts, I mean, it's the middle of winter and we're not getting enough exercise and we're not in the sun and we're probably working harder and we're not taking holidays. And all of that sort of thing adds up. And it does really impact on the heart rate variability, which probably has an indirect link to histamine intolerance, stress, and so on as well. It's all sort of, it's just hard to let go and do less, isn't it, really?
It is tricky. And sometimes we don't realize how much we need it, because I've often found with myself and with clients, what happens is when we're in the stress or in the sort of higher octane, we're okay. We feel okay. But often it's when we come out of that, our body has a great way of going into fight or flight. And when we come out of that and we start to decompress, sometimes that's when our symptoms start to arise more. So I don't know if you relate to that, but that's what I find.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I once worked with a colleague and he would say that when he went through a period of stress, he would physically feel it 2 weeks later. He said, it's always 2 weeks, which is mad, isn't it? That he was so attuned to that.
It is mad. And it's also unbelievable because our bodies, it just shows us how in tune our bodies are. They can keep us in a very safe place and keep us going. For example, in a time of stress where someone's ill and we have to look after a family member, the body has a great way of saying, I'm going to look after you. You've got responsibility here. But it's then when we come out of that, we have to do the recoup work. Otherwise, we're going to find ourselves, moving into patterns of long-term fatigue, chronic fatigue, etc.
Yeah.
So I do think it's just so important as a human to really try and dial into ourselves and see what agrees with us and what doesn't. And sometimes that does involve, making a lifestyle change with our work or what we're doing. It's very, very important.
Yeah. Let's have a look then at some of the things. Obviously, lifestyle is one thing. And then when people come and see you, presumably they don't often say, I think I've got histamine intolerance. I'm probably the only client that's ever been to a practitioner and said that. They've got an issue with their gut or something else. Is that it?
It varies. It depends where the client has come from and how much background info they have, because people nowadays are becoming a lot more aware, I would say. So if I maybe have a client that's quite well versed in nutrition and health, they might have done a bit of digging and say, I think there's something going on with this histamine thing. Can we look into it more? A lot of people, it's gastro issues. And the top thing people come with is energy problems, low energy. And then we say, okay, so low energy, that is not just so much. So, we have to dig in and see, why is there low energy, or why do you not have enough energy to wake up in the morning and feel refreshed? And that's when we're starting to look at things like histamine, heavy metal toxicity, not even toxicity, just accumulation. All those kind of things are extremely important to address. And it's usually simple, that we are living, I always say, beyond our means as humans. We're doing too much and trying to take on too many things and living in an environment that is unfortunately pretty toxic. So we have to put in the good stuff to offset that now. And I think we have to all realize that as humans, that there's a lot more toxicity in the world than there ever has been.
But, you were saying just before that you also find it hard sometimes. And I do as well. I mean, I know that. And I know that, even my WhatsApp inbox is just constantly overflowing. I'm like, God, I need to actually have a part-time job just answering WhatsApps. But I still sort of carry on the hamster wheel. I know when I do my first couple of hours a day, I don't work, but I just get on the exercise bike and meditate. I know I have a better day and I'm better productive, but did I do that this morning? Of course I didn't. No. So how can I do that tomorrow?
Well, I think it's also about realizing, and I've had to realize over the years, not every week is going to be perfect. Like last week for me was just chaotic, and you sort of leave the week and you feel zapped and you think, gosh. But all we can really do is say, okay, well, that got a bit out of balance. So next week, being aware of that. Next week, let's try and bring a bit more balance in. And I always say everything can wait until the next day. You know, there's a to-do list in the day. We get through what we can, and unless it's absolutely life or death, it can roll over into the next day. And I think, you know, that we work better that way when we have a balanced nervous system. So, you know, when people are consuming more stimulants like caffeine, sugars, etc., we are more wired, you know, and we're on the go. And I don't think that helps people remain or feel calm. So it's about finding ways to set your body in the morning, like you say, if you're going to do exercise, if you're going to meditate. And I always say, begin the day as you wish to go on. And I know from my experience, if I do that, it's a good and productive day. But if I just get up and decide to slug down a couple of cups of coffee, you know, by lunchtime, things are done, but all half done. You know, it's just a bit worry, and that's not good.
Interrupting this podcast for one moment to remind you, my podcast partners are Magnesium Breakthrough. Unfortunately, a lot of us have been beaten down by anxiety, stress, and poor sleep, especially recently. Definitely me as well. Due to all the uncertainty in the world, if you're a working parent, you have the extra difficulty of keeping your kids occupied 24/7 while you've been trying to work from home. You've probably done that over the last year or two as well. If you feel exhausted and burnt out, you're not alone. And this podcast is all about energy, so we need to do something about it. There are so many people in a similar place at the moment. What can we do to enhance our mental wellness and recapture our zest for life? One of the things that I do, and I tell other people to do as well, is take magnesium, specifically a magnesium that covers all the important types of magnesium that you need. Because if you go on Amazon, there's a lot of different types of magnesium. Magnesium Breakthrough sorts it out. You can sort of break that anxiety cycle. You're getting 7 unique forms of organic full spectrum magnesium for stress relief and better sleep all in one bottle. I use it every day. magbreakthrough.com/zestology. If you go there and use the code zestology10 to save 10%, and also now you'll get free shipping as well. I'm not sure if that used to be the case, but you do now. So go to magbreakthrough.com/zestology, use the code zestology10 during checkout to save 10%. There's a phrase that it might be quite a British phrase. I don't know if Americans use it, and a lot of people in America listen to this podcast. But you know what I think Magnesium Breakthrough does? It takes the edge off. You can take 2 capsules before you go to bed, and you might well be amazed at your mood and your energy levels. I've sort of tweaked it a bit. I take 1 before bed and 1 in the day as well. The idea is take more magnesium, you get more energy, stronger bones, healthy blood pressure, less irritability, a calmer mood, and it takes the edge off. How about that? magbreakthrough.com/zestology. Use the code zestology10, and in the UK, that code will work on the UK Bioptimizer's site as well. Now, back to the show. Going back to your time on Game of Thrones, that must have been hard because you obviously appreciate the importance of things like circadian rhythm and starting the day as you mean to go on. But when you've had 3 hours sleep and you're back at work at 3 a.m., you've not started the day as you mean to go on.
No, absolutely not. And that was part of the reason why I got into what I do now, because I was working in the performing arts world way back then. And I was reaching a point of burnout because I was working, you know, dancing, acting, etc. And whilst it's great, you don't really look after yourself very well. Lack of sleep, you're eating on the go, eating on set, slugging back, creates a Red Bull back then, you know, you know, people would bring it to the set, you drink it. That's the way it was. And I realised that something had to give, something had to change. And I was so interested in nutrition and health. And my grandmother brought us up that way, you know, into herbs, homeopathy, all those good things. So that sort of opened up for me my eyes to say, I think it's time to make that change. I didn't feel as good as I should at the age I was at. And I just, thank God I did start studying, because it changed so much for me, and I was in a great place to learn about myself and then be able to help others.
Yeah, I mean, it's still, we all have to make compromises though, don't we? And I obviously, until recently when I was working at Sky, I used to at least a couple of times a week finish at midnight, and that would mean I'd get back at 1 a.m, or I'd be home sort of in bed about 1 a.m, and you never get a decent, proper night's sleep. Sometimes I'd even get 8 hours, but it wasn't the same sort of quality of 8 hours. And Yeah, I mean, it was just a sacrifice I was prepared to make, even though I knew it wasn't doing me that much good. I know it's better now when I've got a regular bedtime, but, you know.
Yeah, it is. It's about deciding what we want to do and what we don't want to do. But sometimes choosing the option that we don't want to do is the more beneficial option for us long term, as we know. But yeah, it is about balance. But then I also think balance is a word that doesn't really exist that well, especially in this time and space. So I think it's very much about finding what works for us as individuals, and that's something I'm so passionate about. Honoring each individual as who they are, because we're all unique, and the more comfortable we get with that, the easier the world's going to be.
Yeah. You mentioning the Red Bull on set, that's funny actually. I wore one of these continuous glucose monitors for a while, and I found that there was one particular place where I ate where my blood sugar would spike massively compared to everywhere else, and it was when I was at work, when I was at Sky. I'd go to the canteen, eat in the evening, and my scores, I was using an app called Veri. I don't know if you've heard of it, VERI. It's very good.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's very expensive as well. But my scores when I ate at Sky were so bad afterwards. And even if it would look on a plate as if it was a fairly healthy meal, you know, and carrots and potatoes and a small bit of fish or something like that. But I sort of figured it out that in the end, I think it was the fact that the oils they were using at work was what was spiking my blood sugar and giving me this sort of reaction, which is mad, isn't it, to think of that? But that was my workplace nutrition experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And just what you said there is so interesting. You know, looking at the plate, you think, oh, this has got a good balance of the things I need. But I would get the same. I'd get a food diary sent through, and on paper, I think, gosh, this person must be feeling pretty good if I just go on diet. But, you know, when we start digging in a bit deeper with the diet, what are we cooking in? How well is the person absorbing the nutrients? How well is the person breaking down fats, for example, is a big part as well. That can really start to tell us why someone's feeling so poorly or so unwell when they're eating deemed healthy food. So,
how long do you tend to work with people for?
So an initial session is 2 hours, but then in terms of time span after that, it very much depends on the individual. So I would have our initial session and have our report, and they go away to begin working on that, and we do any testing that we feel is necessary at that stage. I've had clients that I've been working with for 7 years, who, not because they're not better in 7 years, because they use the service as well as a like first aid check-in service, and they use it for their whole family. So, you know, they might call me up when their son has got a tummy bug to ask me what remedy to give them, for example.
Oh, yeah, so maintenance mode.
Yeah, like a maintenance mode. But then as well, other people, you may be working together for a few months or a year. It absolutely depends on how far the person wants to go and if they want that continued support as well. So someone can get feeling a lot better quickly, but it depends as well how in-depth the case is, because we work with a lot of gastrointestinal issues and things. So.
Yeah. Oh, that was it for me. The gastro stuff. My God. And I'm sort of 95% better now, but it still strikes occasionally. And that's what I'm working with my practitioner on, who sounds like she's got a very similar approach to you. Yeah. And I mean, it's not particularly straightforward when you start looking into genetics and testing. And, you know, I personally am finding that I'm taking a supplement that she's recommended that I really react to, which I think is an indication that I need it, I believe. Yeah. But I'm just going very, very small doses. So, you know, it can be a long process, can't it? And do you work with, so you said with Toxoprevent, you also work with them as well as your own business. Is it sort of similar sort of thing? Someone might have histamine issues, they come to you, you work within the company with them?
Yeah, so I'm one of the clinical education team. So we produce a lot of the content, the education. So like last year, we'd have been doing a lot of practitioner training webinars, consumer training webinars as well. I'm very much about upping education and understanding on certain topics. So for example, at the moment, I'm working on an education series for consumers on histamine. So what is histamine, how it works in the body, symptoms, you know, I'm trying to educate people more and more. So us average Joes in the public can find out these things. And then I would manage a lot of phone calls and emails from customers as well. And I'm there basically to help advise people on what's going on for them, what their symptoms are, what products could potentially help them, and nutritional advice as well for those people. So we're really about just supporting and raising awareness for people, because some people come and they just say, gosh, I have no idea what's going on, and nobody can tell me what's going on. And you get chatting to them, and 5 or 10 minutes, you can start to understand,
wow,
there's something going on here with histamine potentially. So we could add in a couple of changes to the lifestyle, some Toxin-Prevent usually really helps in that front, and we can see really big differences for that person. So it's just educating people, in my opinion.
I know that you're into cold water swimming. Is that something you recommend your clients as well?
Yeah, I love cold water swimming. So I'm in Ireland at the moment. So obviously it's surrounded by it's cold. It's snowing right now.
Is it? Wow.
So we're surrounded by snow and surrounded by ocean, which is lovely. My last year I was in London in the pandemic. So I was in London that whole time. And I really missed the sea. Like I really, really missed that. But being home is just great. I really adore cold water swimming. When you're in the routine of it, when you're not in the routine of it, it's pretty horrific. But I do recommend it to people. But again, it depends on the individual. If their nervous system is really imbalanced, for example, initially taking that plunge into cold water, it needs to be done in a sensible way. And I'm very lucky. I've got friends here who are all Wim Hof trained instructors, so we all do it as a group. And it's a huge community here, and it is wonderful. It's a community, right? So I think anything with a community that's outdoors is healthy.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah, I was. I love a bit of cold water. I would say I'm more cold water dunk than cold water swim, if you know what I mean. I'm sort of in and out. Yeah. But I think that certainly, I actually do think it helps with histamine as well as all sorts of, definitely with mood afterwards. I mean, but funnily enough, the opposite, going hot at the moment doesn't really seem to suit me quite so well. I've gone through real phases of I've got sunlight and sauna here, but there's just something about the histamine dump that comes from getting too hot at the moment, which is a real big thing for me. Even a long hot shower, I get the same sort of thing.
Yeah, I used to get that with the shower when I wasn't well years ago, and I would have had lots of histamine issues. I would be in the shower and it would almost seem like I was allergic to water at the time, because I was just responding so much to that heat. I remember that.
Wow.
And I get a lot of clients the same. Sauna with histamine issues, sauna isn't good to begin with. The cold is good because it's constrictive, so it's really lowering that inflammatory response. So,
right.
So a lot of people do benefit from that for many different issues and symptoms.
Yeah. Well, I ask everyone on this podcast, what is one book that you would recommend and one tip for living with more energy and vitality? What is your sort of book recommendation and your tip?
I actually have the book here. I wasn't prepared for this, but I have it. I'll show you to me. I love this book and I recommend it to all my clients. It's called A Life Worth Breathing by Max Storm.
Right. Yes, I saw that on your biography on the Nouveau Health website. Tell me about this book, because I'm really into breath at the moment, and I feel it has a massive impact on me. But I'm looking forward to hearing about it.
Oh yeah, Max is amazing. He is the most gentle and wonderful man you'll ever meet. I had the benefit of training with him a few years ago in Hamburg, and he is a yoga instructor, but now essentially more just focused on breath work, travels the whole world teaching breath work. And his story is so interesting because he's been living in the past in that fast-paced lifestyle, on the go all the time, and he just talks so much about how, again, as humans, we're living beyond our means. We're all following the sort of like fight or flight pathway, and he does a lot of work with people with PTSD, etc. as well. And his breathwork classes are just phenomenal. He comes to try yoga quite a bit in London. I think he's coming later this year.
Right.
He's amazing. You've got to read this book. Actually, you know what? I recommend the book as an audiobook, which I never really do because I'm a bit funny about it depends who's reading it. But it's his voice reading the audiobook, and he has the most relaxing voice. he's just an amazing man. Please check it out.
I will,
if you're listening,
yeah.
check it out. It's so easy to read as well. It's such an easy read. And for me, it always resets the dial in life on my priorities. When I read that book, I go, yeah, okay, I need to home in a bit more on this, a bit more self-care. And it just really reminds you what's important in life.
Yeah. Just while you were talking, I think possibly my wife is a yoga teacher, and she took a sort of top-up training last year, and I think he might have taught a day of that training, and
Probably.
she loved it. Yeah,
he's awesome. He's really cool. Check him out.
Great. So are you a mouth taper at night?
No, I'm not a mouth taper at night.
I am.
He's a bit. Are you?
It's amazing. It's changed my life. It's probably the best individual practice that I've got. It's fantastic.
Is it Pat Davili? Did you follow Pat, the author from Ireland? He's really into that.
I haven't heard of it.
You'd like him, I think. He's a cool guy.
Right.
Check him out.
Yeah, James Nestor's book, which I read on breath, was the one that made me think about it. But again, my wife started doing it first, and I was like, what are you doing? And then 6 months later, I started doing it. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's pretty good, actually.
Yeah, I actually met a guy in the sauna last night, an older gentleman, and he was talking about health and well-being. And he said, my son's mental at the minute. He says he's sellotaping his mouth together when he sleeps. He said, have you heard of that? And I said, yeah, I actually have heard of that.
It's amazing. It's so good. Yeah.
Okay,
cool. So what about one tip for living with more energy and vitality then?
I think it's not always easy, but being true to yourself is really important. I think when we're pushing against the grain and we're doing things that we don't feel that comfortable doing, whether it's work, whether it's relationships, whether it's just, saying yes to too many things that we maybe want to say no to, that drains our energy stores. And I'm a big believer in our emotional health feeds our physical health.
Yeah.
Emotionally, we need to be filling up that cup. If that means doing what you want and to a degree and doing something that gives you purpose and you feel passionate about, I really find that really helps long term with people's energy. Obviously, there's loads of practical things we do, nutrition, etc. And I could say have more antioxidants, eat more greens. But on a core level, your emotions are very, very important for your physical health.
Yeah, I really do agree. It's sort of it's easier to focus on the latest supplement, really, isn't it?
It is. What would you say? What would be your advice? Can we hear?
Funnily enough, I mean, we were having a discussion the other day in terms of, we think a lot about parenting. We've got a 3-year-old, he's almost 3, and I've really come to the conclusion that just the most important thing is to allow him to have a sort of emotionally balanced upbringing as possible, and to try to bring him up to be in touch with his emotions as possible, because you're going to have ups and downs in life. And if you can sort of learn to deal with those emotions in a healthy, balanced way, that's probably the best thing that you could possibly do. Yeah. And certainly from my own personal perspective, having done a lot of work on myself, everything else started to slot into place once the emotional aspect. So it's good answer. I agree with you. That's my answer.
Good. All right.
I'm basically just saying, yeah, what she said.
No, I mean, it's not an easy one, but it's not an easy one to follow, but I do really believe in it.
No, it's not. No. And my training is in NLP, in neuro-linguistic programming, which I love. And I've been doing that for almost 20 years. And amazing. I have to say that whilst I think NLP is fantastic in a lot of things, when it comes to the really deep psychological work, it was a psychotherapist and probably a little bit of emotional freedom therapy that helped, but not NLP. NLP is good for a lot of things, but not the deepest sort of delving into those painful areas, which you might have just pushed away a little bit.
Absolutely. I totally agree. You gotta be ready to dive deep for that kind of stuff, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. So how often do you go cold water swimming in winter?
So the truth. Before I was in London last year, I swam every day of the summer and winter. I prefer the winter swimming because there's no jellyfish. We get really high levels of jellyfish here from around about March or April right through to the end of September, and it's just so disappointing because you go down, you're ready for your swim, and you're like, oh my gosh, the water's filled with them.
You can't even get in.
Some days it wouldn't be safe to get in. You can risk it, you can get the sting, but everyone responds very differently, to that, and it can be really nasty. So I prefer the winter. But now since we've been back, we relocated back to Northern Ireland in September from London. we haven't been that great, I'll be honest, with the cold water swimming. Between the move, my partner, he's really busy working here. I've been really busy with the business. I'm with Live Health Scare. Making excuses here, but some days you just haven't got down. Then we did get down for a wee run, and then we all got COVID before Christmas, so we kind of got thrown off the wagon a bit.
Yeah.
So we both said we're getting back in at the end of February, and February is the coldest month of the year in the water. So
yeah, good. Okay, well, 1st of March you'll be in there.
Yeah.
So where can people find out? Obviously, you've got your own practice, and then the Nouveau practice as well. Where can people find out more? And I'd love to send people your way, especially as you understand histamine. It'd be fantastic to send people in your direction.
Yeah, well, I mean, at NH Innovations, which is our website, and I'm sure you can link it with this, Tony.
Oh, yeah.
You can find us there. I'm there all week, happy to chat to people, email, whatever you need advice on with regards to histamine. We're your guys there. We're happy to chat. We have a great team. And also then I work, as I said, privately. So that's April Alexandra Nutrition. I've got all the social platforms, Instagram, Facebook, etc. So you can find me on there, and I can provide my email address obviously to you as well, Tony, and you can drop me an email if you think that I'm a good fit. I always have an initial chat with people to work out, if I'm the right person for them or if I need to point them somewhere else.
Great. Wow. Keep up the good work. It's lovely to talk to you. Thanks for that today. I've really enjoyed it. And we will look forward to speaking to you again at some point, hopefully.
Thank you so much, Tony. Thank you.
That is it for this week's Zestology. Thank you, April Alexandra. Just before I go, I just wanted to share a couple of reflections about being in Thailand and general health levels. Because here, my diet has been way less good than it is at home, really. I mean, I'm eating lots of nice fresh food, but I'm having ice creams quite a lot and a couple of drinks in the evenings and having a full-on nice time. When there's no particularly healthy gluten-free snacks to hand, I'll just get a bag of crisps from the local shop or whatever it is. I mean, not dreadful, but not brilliant. But I just feel so much healthier than normal because of all the sunlight and the movement and the relaxation and the good sleep, spending loads of time with my lovely family, my son absolutely loving swimming for hours at a time and digging on the beach. All of those sort of things, you realise unwinding and de-stressing matters more than anything. So if you can get some of that over this week and this weekend coming up, I heartily recommend it. And I know it's not always possible to escape on holiday. But one conversation we always have when we come back from holidays, how can we keep this vibe going when we get home? It's never quite the same, but I think a lot about that. that is the question I would love to answer. And of course, I'm wearing an oura ring. My heart rate variability has rocketed while I've been here, and my heart rate is about 10 beats a minute lower overnight, which tells you a lot, doesn't it? But look, thank you for listening to Zestology. One of the few supplements, actually, I've bought quite a few supplements out here, but one of the supplements I have bought is Magnesium Breakthrough, taking lots of magnesium because it's very hot out here. It's about 31 degrees most days, and so need those extra supplements. In fact, I've been taking a couple of extra at night simply because when I get a bit dehydrated or I haven't got enough minerals flowing around, I get weird jerky legs, which is probably more information than you needed, but that's what happens. So I've been taking the extra Magnesium Breakthrough, and that's been leaving me feeling good. You can go to magbreakthrough.com/zestology and use the code zestology10. Okay, so use the code zestology10 anywhere on the Bioptimizer site. You will get 10% off. magbreakthrough.com/zestology. Use the code zestology10 if you're in the UK. I'm now walking through the little resort where we're staying, and so you might be, that sound is probably not quite as tropical as at the start of the podcast, but I think it's an air conditioning unit I'm walking past. But yeah, if you use the code zestology10, you will get 10% off. As I say, I'm hoping next week's podcast is going to be recorded fully from here. We'll find a nice spot to do it. In the meantime, thank you for listening to Zestology. Thank you to April Alexandra for coming on. Do check out all of her stuff because she is absolutely brilliant. And Watch this space for our collaboration. Speak to you soon.